And we are live. Welcome everybody to Lubbock Compact Live for Wednesday, August the 30th. This is our last one of the month. So you know how we usually do around here. It's myself, Adam Hernandez, and my co-host Josh Shankles here with the various city updates. What's been happening over at City Council? How are things moving around in the city? Any new developments, all that kind of stuff. But we also have to get into the city council meeting that just took place this afternoon. I'm still a little hyped from it, I gotta admit, but I think I'm gonna be okay. We're gonna try to calm it down for the rest of the show. But it was an eventful meeting, and we'll get all into it. So please share this far and wide. Let everybody see this so that everybody can see what's going on and what's happening. It's very important, and I'll let you go, Josh, but it's very important that the citizens of Lubbock at large understand what's happening in real time on that council dais, because it will show you a lot. And I think pretty much just about everybody is going to be a little concerned about this, what took place today, because that's what got me so hyped up. I was a little upset, but we'll get all into it. All right. So, Josh, you ready to kick us off? Let's do it.
Yeah, dude, I'm gonna down-regulate you and then let you get spun right back up. But I'm so glad you brought that intro to the show, because actually the first thing that I wanted to talk about, my car radio is tuned to NPR. Probably a lot of NPR listeners in our audience. One of the afternoon broadcasts was about disappearing local journalism, particularly in small and mid-sized cities, much like our own. And there were some features to the news piece. I don't want to dig into it all. Go listen, go support your local NPR station for the best journalism. But I'm so glad they brought this up, because, and this came up in our council meeting just a minute ago, one of the whole reasons we do this show is to give a more in-depth and scrutinized analysis of what happens in our city on that dais. This is so important because this is where so many functions, where the rubber hits the road as far as how we live our lives, how we move through our places that we live. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because it was the first thing that I wanted to mention on the top of the show. This is why we do this, and it's such important work. So thanks for helping me do it, co-host. Okay, let's get into it. We've been promising people all month. August has been a very busy month around City Hall. And so we've been talking on shows all throughout the month that the first thing we wanted to get into is to update folks about the city budget. City budget sessions always start in August. City staff is preparing that well before that. A lot of times interest groups and other stakeholders, much like our own, are submitting recommendations for city budget during this time, and we're kind of seeing it all come to fruition. And so that's how August kicked off with the start of the city budget session. So let's just get into an overview of what's happening and what people can expect out there. So the total city budget, after it was all calculated out, ended up being 960. Where's my notes? I think it's like $960 million and some change. And that's a little bit of growth. There's $11.8 million in estimated new revenue, and $3.8 million of that is anticipated will be coming from new property. So the remainder is more sales tax collection, more impact fee collection, any of the service fee rates, things like that. So overall staying pretty flat, especially since the council voted on a taxable revenue rate of 0.480164 cents per $100 of valuation. So this comes up slightly above the no new revenue rate. It is under the rate that if the city needs to go to that, they need it to be voter approved. And so this kind of shoots right between those two boundary lines of where your city is known to be losing money and where they would need to go to the taxpayer for a approval. So we'll get into that a little bit more because, of course, the rate is only one piece. Everybody who's a property owner knows that the valuation is where this really starts to have the rubber hit the road. And I know we have much to say about that topic. But to the other pieces of revenue, which usually comes from our rate payers, people that are paying utilities or permitting from the city or whatever. Some of the rate changes that folks can anticipate to see is to see a 60 cents decrease per ERU for stormwater. And this is a kind of specific calculation. I put my bill away, but it's basically like every 7,500 square feet of non-permeable surface is 1 ERU. And most residential homes aren't going to go over that. And so most people can anticipate seeing a 60-cent increase in their stormwater rate. But if you're a large property owner, maybe you're going to see that stack end over end, depending on how many ERUs you have. Wastewater is not going to change. Our solid waste collection fee is going to go up by $1. And folks can anticipate a 25-cent increase for just potable water at the over 2,000 gallons rate. So still free under 1,000 gallons. You cross over that, and then you enter this new fee structure. So overall, we're seeing modest increases across the rate, the services. I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but longtime listeners of the show, and I know you will remember that for many of these rate areas, our impact fee policy is currently set to 0. And so as we build new infrastructure, as we build onto this, of course, the cost of that and the cost of maintaining that is put onto the ratepayers themselves. And so now, as before, we see that growing, although rather modestly. You want to comment so far, Adam?
Yeah, actually, you know, we say it many times on the show, but we as a city are growing very rapidly. If we want our services to really take care of the businesses that they're trying to take care of, whether that's solid waste department, if you want to stop having a situation where they're having to skip certain households, not because they want to, but because they don't have the resources to do it, or whether that's road maintenance or whatever it is around the city that you would like to work for you as a city government, we have to pay for those things. We have to pay for those things. And one of the facts of life is that inflation is going to happen regardless. There's never going to be a day where there's 50-cent gas at the pump again. Never. It'll never happen. No matter what you do. It's just the nature of economics and how it works. So over time, if you try to spend the same amount of money and your costs are rising and the amount of facilities and houses and things you've got to pay for are rising, it doesn't take a math genius to understand that you're going to run into issues. You're going to run into budget issues. The last thing I'll say to button all of this up, this once again confirms and proves that we may know what we're talking about from time to time. Because when you set the no new revenue rate, that was all the buzz when the new mayor did that. And during the last budget section, I predicted at that time, the very next budget session, you're going to have to raise it. You have to. You absolutely have to, or you're going to run out of money. It was just a wrong idea. Okay, it was the wrong thing to do, and this just confirms it. I would like to highlight that because again, people need to know these things and understand these things, not because so I can feel good because I was right, but so that we understand what the implications are when we make certain policy changes. You have to understand that sometimes things sound good, but when you weigh it all out, it's really not. And so we need to understand those things. And so I just wanted to highlight that.
No, it's such a good point because this next piece kind of goes into that. So there were a few points of conjecture and things that were kind of ironed out in all these budget processes, one of which were some requests for new personnel in a few city departments. One was a new staff member for the codes department. Another was a new staff member for animal control. And one was a new staff member for our public health department. Now, animal control and codes enforcement also comes with the cost of needing a vehicle or a truck, specifically, really particularly animal control, because of course they have a very specialized type of vehicle that they need to be on. And so the first year cost for codes was going to be $110,000. The first year cost for a new animal control employee was going to be $120,000. First year cost for a new public health employee was going to be $65,000 because that person does not require a vehicle to perform their job. And in all three of these cases, the city manager recommended not hiring those new personnel and kicking that back to the next budget cycle and seeing where they were. Now, for the codes enforcement, for the, again, particularly the animal control officer, this is something that's come up on the show before and that we've highlighted before, but the city is experiencing a lot of difficulty fulfilling contracts for fleet vehicles, for a lot of different equipment. There are still kinks in the supply chain that are taking time to catch up, particularly with things like fleet vehicles, which are only made in batch at the plants that make them. And so in this particular case, the city manager was like, well, we might be able to hire the animal control officer, but we couldn't get them a truck to patrol the streets in. And so, you know, you're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. But going right back to your point, in all three of these areas, code enforcement, how we deliver public health, and particularly animal control has been close to the show and our organization this year, is that just as you say, some things just have to be paid for. And the longer that we delay and kick the can down the road and refuse to set our budget and our rates within our means and invest in the things that pay off over the long term. And we don't have a horrible problem with this, but we see signs of this all over: animal control, codes enforcement, and public health being the most recent thing. So he said, don't recommend these 3 personnel changes. That was a bummer to hear. Maybe we'll see. We'll keep our eye on that, but those are absolutely needs we know we have. So got to keep our eye on that.
So did he say anything about, are there going to be efforts to source the trucks to try to make this happen by next year? Did he say any of that?
Not during this specific instance, but it has come up before that they are exploring how to keep vehicles in the fleet services for longer, and they've changed policy around that to be something hard from a hard stop policy that doesn't have a whole lot of edges to it, to like a maintenance and upkeep based policy that should be able to extend the life of all of these vehicles. And they are looking at other sourcing options, different vendors to buy from, the resale market, different vehicles that aren't within the specification of what they might normally use, but would be acceptable and workable. So this is something that does continue to be a problem, and something that we are seeing the city be responsive on, to answer your question.
Okay, great.
And then the other thing here was, we were excited to hear that the city was going to enact a 4% cost of living increase across the board for all city employees, that's civil service and non-civil service, so police and fire and everybody else. As you know, the city has been working on adjusting the pay rates for all the various city departments to be more in keeping with our peer cities, that will allow recruitment, that will allow better retention, and allow us to finally catch up on some of these areas where we're behind in staff or losing staff. So this is a good addition. And now that inflation is starting to kind of flatten off, 4% is much more workable than it was before. We did see the city council members, to their credit, be kind of adamant about wanting this to be as much as possible and wanting it to be across the board and even amongst all the employees. So I thought that was very fair. Glad to see that able to fit within the budget. And, you know, those are the big highlights, I thought. I mean, of course, there's a lot of wonky details. Our cash reserves are good, and in most cases are meeting within policy. There are a few of them that are still a little out of spec. You might remember that we covered this earlier in the year, but they're on their way back. And yeah, that's the big budget thing.
Yeah, so we got a couple of things here in the comments while you look for the next thing.
Sure.
Stacy was on top of it as well. She said LAS says they are unable to source vehicles even if they have the money. They discussed that at the last advisory board meeting. So pretty
Mhm.
much what we just talked about. Thank you, Stacy. Um, she stays up on all the meetings, so that's awesome. And
Yeah.
then Barbara Bonato said used vehicles. And yes, Barbara, sometimes the city does have to do what they have to do in certain instances. It's not ideal, obviously, but I'm just excited to see them trying to find some workable solution. My issue comes up is when they're just not trying at all. That's my thing. So they're clearly trying things. I'm encouraged to hear that they're looking at other sourcing options and trying to find other vendors and things of that nature. And that's all we ever ask. Longtime viewers of the show will know this is literally all we ask as Lubbock Compact is just like just try, right? Like number one, respond to the things that are actually happening in the community. And the only kind of, I guess, negative I have to say about it is we've have been dealing with these issues for a very long time. So we've had a long, long time to deal with this. Nonetheless, if going forward, we're trying to find those vehicles, we're trying to get this rectified, that's all we ask for. So I'm kind of encouraged.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, I mean, if you can pay cash for a car and don't have to finance it, hey. Okay, let's talk about the diversion center because this came up in the last few city council meetings. This folks might remember that this was a recommendation for how to use and spend ARPA money that was allocated to the city. Obviously, many know and understand this is something that we covered on the show, but there is a lot of mental health crisis in America. Our city is no stranger to that as well. And Texas is no stranger to that. In fact, we're one of the highest rates across the country and have some of the least resources in this area. And so when we saw the diversion center, which is meant to be a response center for folks in currently experiencing or have a chronic mental health crisis. The center is meant to attend to those sorts of needs. Ideally, it's meant to keep people who might be experiencing these kind of, again, very common and increasingly common scenarios for them to be able to seek help at all sorts of levels, be able to seek help from self-harm or from harming others, and also to keep them out of the criminal justice system, to keep them from being penalized or criminalized for something that is a health matter and a matter of public health, but also to have the right type of people responding to these kinds of things, because that's usually not the police. So that was the purpose of the diversion center. Now we're starting to see some of the rubber hit the road. So agreements have been signed. This was a joint city and county project because the majority of Lubbock County is Lubbock City. So there are a lot of things like this. So it'll be jointly funded for the building of it and for the operational funding for it, and also seeking a lot of outside funding and grant funding. Star Care is the partner for this. They have a site plan developed, and forgive me, I didn't find this in my notes. I forgot where they said they were taking possession of a building and resetting it. It might be an old school. We'll try to find out more information about that. It has remained within budget, and the anticipated open date is April 2025. So it will be voted on, the money spent, they'll get going on it. April 2025 is the anticipated open date. Obviously, we'd like to see that go faster, but these types of things take time. It's just an incredibly important development that our city's in this.
Yeah, for
As,
sure. The building, unless something has changed, I'm pretty sure it's the same situation. It is actually on the Star Care property. So Star
okay.
Care owns a very large property, and a lot of that they weren't really using. And so it's part of that. They do have to widen the road, and they've got to create an entrance off the road and all that sort of thing. So and as you stated, I can't remember the exact amounts, but it was a partnership with the funding of this between the county and the city. So that's great. Anytime we can have those county city partnerships is really good. But I'm really excited about this. Folks will know that my oldest daughter took her own life in 2018, and we've had some issues with our other daughter needing treatment from time to time, and so the closest places that we have to do these things to Lubbock, I don't know if a lot of people know, are Amarillo or Big Spring. And so it's already traumatic as a parent when you're going through something like this. But then and we've made those trips twice now, to have to get up and take your child to Amarillo and leave them there. And they're not allowed, various things, and you have to take them clothes because they can't take stuff from home and all this kind of stuff. And so, it's just a whole traumatic experience as it is. And so I sure wish that as a parent going through those things that I could have had a local option. That would have been much easier when dealing with such a tragic situation at the time. So I'm really excited about this. I know it does seem like it's taken forever. We've been talking about this diversion center for probably 3 years or 2.5 years or something. But excited to hear that there's finally an open date of April. So you said 2025?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah.
Can't get here soon enough. And I will also say that, of course, we're big fanboys of our public health department, and they have been making incredible strides and investments in our community. This remains another key feature, and I'm so glad students coming online. I think we'll all benefit from this greatly. Okay, yeah, we're actually moving pretty good, dude. So now I want to talk about 3 different instances of citizen comments that happened in City Hall. So, as we've said before on the show, a lot of this is very wonky and boring, is kind of just motor functions, is the mayor executing on things that have already been discussed and different contracts for things out of the budget. It's a lot of it is pretty banal, but when there's citizen comments, that's always interesting to us, of course, because our whole deal is the public engagement and making City Hall work for the people. So over the course of the 2 city council meetings, we had these 3 different instances of citizen comments that I wanted to kind of draw attention to and lift up, because it's the voice of our community, and I thought it was really important, and also kind of highlights things that we've been discussing and throw some light on it. So the first one is in one of the meetings, there was a whole dust up between Carpet Tech and Terra Estates, which is one of our more affluent communities in central Lubbock. The basic gist of this is that Carpet Tech has opened a new restoration center, and it's very close to this neighborhood. In fact, it abuts against it. And there were some kind of ugly back and forths between the neighborhood and Carpet Tech. The most egregious of which is that Carpet Tech chopped down a whole bunch of trees that were in an alleyway that were technically not supposed to be there. You're not supposed to plant trees in city plats and easements. But nonetheless, Eagle Scout planted these there. He was a resident of the neighborhood. He put these trees up in the alley. They were in Carpet Tech's way for some reason that's currently unexplained. And so Carpet Tech chopped them down, even though technically Carpet Tech didn't have the right to chop them down because they are on city property and could be considered city property in their own right. So Carpet Tech chopped down these trees, and that made everybody mad. And also, as expected, this really increased the amount of noise pollution and light pollution into the neighborhood, because Carpet Tech's, building and site is all lit up, and they're running machines and trucks and whatnot. So anyway, that's the background. These entities were crosswise. basically what happened is that Carpet Tech put in an application to close an alleyway behind there because that's how they're going to direct their trucks and traffic and kind of move things around their site. And the neighborhood was opposed to it because they're mad at Carpet Tech for chopping down their trees, filling up their dumpsters, a couple of things that the neighborhood finds really problematic. And so, as you well know, the city council meeting opens, this request to close the alleyway so that Carpet Tech can do this, that, and the other is on the agenda. So there's public comments about it. People start getting up and talking about it, and the neighborhood was pretty upset. They had a lot of really interesting commentary on this. I was just trying to find my notes on this one. Like, the neighborhood all got up. I thought it was interesting because they pointed out these things that relate to buffering. This has been a topic of ours, like how to properly buffer different uses of land next to each other. And those trees were a big part of that. And city council was none too happy about their trees getting chopped down. In fact, they kind of commented about like, oh, so Carpet Tech went and destroyed city property. Interesting. And then they were also not too pleased about the dumpster situation and asked the city manager to deploy somebody in codes to kind of find out about the dumpster situation. They had some testimony from planners there. There's, some of the neighborhood individuals mentioned, like, they brought up a Title VI violation. Oh, no, wait, this is actually something else. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes for the next thing. Forget it. The neighborhood was upset. The city council was upset at Carpet Tech. The alley closure came up for a vote, and the city council unanimously voted against it. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because of what it tells us. And to me, what this tells us is that this city council can move very quickly to protect neighborhoods from onerous and egregious commercial and industrial applications. And it just has to apparently be the right people who bring up this problem and not the wrong people. And so I thought it was really interesting how the city council, they were so clutching their pearls over Carpet Tech. And sure, I agree, like, all those things are egregious and not permissible. And of course, we're on the side of the neighborhood in this one. Although business entities and neighbors should be able to be good neighbors. So, not particularly anti-business to say that, but I did think it was interesting because it tells us that this council can act and will to protect the interests of neighborhoods, but which neighborhoods?
Yeah, this is actually in West Lubbock. Yeah, so this would be in West Lubbock. Terra Vista is in, well, almost Northwest Lubbock at this point, but yeah, just like you said, when it's various neighborhoods, things tend to happen within one meeting. When it's other neighborhoods, such as those in historic District 1 and 2, I've been alive 42 years, and we're still waiting on policies to help our neighborhoods in this regard. And so, interestingly enough, and we probably won't get into this part anyway later, but at today's city council meeting, that was one of the topics being brought up. The developers weren't really, I guess, happy with the amount of buffer you need in a yard. So Carpet Tech has kind of slid in here before the Unified Development Code goes into effect, which is what we were talking about at today's meeting. That handles all of this, right? And in the Unified Development Code, there's a rule that if you have a place like this Carpet Tech, and it's going to be up against a neighborhood, you'll need a specific yard, essentially, and you can have various things. There are options, so you can have like any combination of like hills or trees or large rocks or what have you. You need to create a barrier, is the idea. And the developers weren't really quite happy with, I guess, the amount of things that they needed to put in there. And so they were trying to change some of that. And that was one of the recommendations today, was to just leave it as is, which we were all for. Unfortunately, it doesn't really help Terra Vista neighborhood at this point because Carpet Tech's already there and UDC has not passed. And so, yeah, it's just one of those things. that shows you again, and I'll get off this soapbox, but it just shows you again that the issues we bring up in North and East Lubbock have nothing to do with anything other than humanity. If you're a human being and you want your environment to be friendly for your family, there's certain things you don't want. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what culture you have. I don't care what neighborhood you live in. If you're a human being, you don't want loud, smoky, bright light things where you have to sleep and live and work. That just is what it is. So that's my first soapbox of the evening, I guess.
No, 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 that's perfect. So the next one was uh public comments and citizen comments that came up at a different city council meeting, and this was in regards to city bus and the Lubbock Adult Day Center. So I didn't fully know. I mean, I assumed something like this existed, but you know, this is another reason why we pay attention to these meetings. It brings things to light that need attention. So the Lubbock Adult Day Center provides care and services for a lot of adults who have profound disabilities. These are folks who are entirely non-ambulatory, maybe blind and deaf, might have severe cognitive impairments. These are folks who aren't going to be functioning and normally participating in society, not in the way that we are. Many of them have full-time caregivers, and many of them have part-time caregivers, and that's why they're coming and going from the day center and or a lot of medical appointments. So anyway, that is the service this provides. This is an important and necessary function in our city, in our community. These are the real heroes of our town, folks like this that provide this kind of care. Anyway, the point is that there have been some changes in city bus services that they use that are federally funded. You know, this is part of federal mandates and care for people under the Americans with Disabilities Act, that federal funds are given to municipal transportation entities to care for the transportation needs of individuals like this. And a lot of this is done through scheduled services. This isn't popping people on the bus in most cases. This is done through like scheduled transportation services. I don't know all the details of the changes. They didn't come up here. This is an area that could use some more investigation, detail, and advocacy on. But basically, there have been some changes in city bus services that have made the adult day center and their clients' ability to access these services a lot more difficult and a lot less predictable. And so they have things going on where two different people are living in a home together and both of them have appointments, but they'll be picked up on two different trips several hours apart, and it becomes a whole logistics nightmare because while the drivers are dealing with that, then they're not dealing with somebody else who's waiting on an appointment or transportation. And so it becomes this kind of chain effect of failing services. And it's leaving a lot of these people with not a whole lot of backup plan, and their caregivers without a whole lot of backup plan, waiting for hours and hours in unfavorable conditions, needing to get to appointments that are hard to schedule in their own right. It's just really a hot mess. And so these folks were there to speak against a specific provision about in the city agenda that was about changing management of city bus from locally to a Fort Worth based company. And so they were basically opposing that change because they didn't really have another option to talk about their real problem on the agenda. And just a little side note, because this is one of our whipping horses, is before they even got up to speak, the mayor supposedly had intel that these people were trying to talk about something out of turn on the agenda, which again, granted, it's a city council meeting, you have to keep to the agenda. But the fact that he got this covert information and used it to kind of punch down on the dais, and before anybody even had a chance to say anything, be like, don't hijack my meeting, you people. I thought it was in poor taste. And then the people who were planning on getting up to give public comment were entirely within bounds of being on topic. And then he had to apologize, which was embarrassing for him. And what I think this tells us is that we have a decorum problem on the dais. We have had it for a long time. These people can be very discourteous to the public in interactions, and do not take their job of hearing what is being said to them and processing that and acting on that. Often they don't take that very seriously, and they end up in this snit. And here are the people who are coming to city council for exactly the reason that people should be coming to city council. In fact, strike that. City council should be coming to them first. That is their job and duty and responsibility. And so I just thought the whole thing was a hot mess. And I think it also pointed to the fact that this is their job, this is their duty, to be attending to these things that are so clearly in need of remedy. And it just, once again, for me, highlights where we lose out because we have part-timers on this work. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I actually have intimate relationship with the adult day center. My aunt had Down syndrome, and she lived to be in her 50s or 60s. I don't know. She passed away earlier this year. And for pretty much as long as I've been alive, she's gone to the adult day center. I visited it many times. The staff is great over there. The services, as you said, these are very necessary. The reason why my grandma had to send my aunt to the adult day center is because there was no way she was going to afford a van to come and pick her up and all of that. So she had to send her on the bus every day for her entire life. So this is a very vital service to so many people. And it just, again, I think it highlights another aspect of this where, and I'm not saying all of them, but many council members that we've seen over the years have the means to take care of their people no matter what has happened. They need a big van with the lift for the wheelchair. They have that. They can afford that. They can get that. They need special outfitting in the house so that they don't slip and fall in the bathtub and all of this stuff. They can get that. Now, granted, my grandma was able to get that, but through programs that were grants that gave people who didn't have very much money those things so that we could have those things at least in the house. It also highlights a broader problem with our public transportation. And Stacy Johnson, who's very active in the comments tonight, she knows all about this, and she can tell you, she can go on and on for a very long time about this. There's a lot of holes in our public transportation system, and even the management of that system would love some assistance and would love to get this taken care of. I just think it's a shame in a city this size that we're not putting the correct amount of resources into this. We have so many students here. We've got so many people here who don't have vehicles. It's far to get everywhere. It's not practical for somebody to be sitting on a bus 5 and 6 hours to try to get to and from a job. Like, and that's like one way a lot of times. It's a very long time to get places. But staying on topic, it's just, it really does. And I'm not going to get on the soapbox because we've got to get on that about him on the next segment. But it really does bother me when people have this reaction to people who may have disabilities or who may struggle with mobility issues or any number of things. When they look at these people with impatience and dismissal, it really does touch a nerve. And I helped to take care of my aunt. My grandma did most of the heavy lifting, but I also was a caretaker for my grandma in her last years when she had Alzheimer's and dementia. And so I know what it's like to deal with that. And I get it. You don't want that burden in your life. You don't want to have to think about anybody in these situations. You don't want to have to do anything about it. It doesn't affect you. But I think, I don't know. I'm struggling to find the words because this touches such a nerve. I just don't think our leadership should be acting that way. I'll leave it there.
Yeah. Yep. I couldn't agree more. And then the last one, I'll get through this one fast, even though it's an important thing that we've been following, but I want to give the last few minutes, I want to give a good block to talk about this last bit, is the student housing project. So the last public comments that I'll discuss and topic that I'll discuss is the student housing project proposed for South Overton. Folks might remember our coverage of this, starting with the one that was planned for Tech Terrace. That was defeated 7-0. We covered this a lot. There were many similarities in this South Overton development in its scale and its scope and in the neighborhood's opposition to it. One encouraging thing that we saw was different neighborhood associations kind of shoving into this issue together. So we saw the South Overton neighborhood and Tech Terrace neighborhood and Heart of Lubbock really speaking to this as a kind of unified voice on these issues, and the Congress of Neighborhood Association speaking to this in kind of a unified force. That is great. That is exactly the type of organizing you would want to see. I'll be honest, I didn't watch all of the citizen comments for this one. There were many, but they were very reflective of what we saw in the Tech Terrace thing, that folks thought that this was an inappropriate amount of scale, that it was really going to come to dominate the character of the neighborhood, that people in a high rise are going to be peering down and over their neighbors. Parking could become an issue. These are all very valid concerns. Of course, the developers came back with a lot of answers to that, and they do also have some good points about what this could bring, how important, at adding 700 new students annually every year at Texas Tech, they got to live somewhere. And sending them across the city, deploying them across the city and having all those cars and all that car traffic has its own downsides. But, I don't want to get all, we have said, the best solution to this would be for the developers to proactively seek solution instead of twist the arms of everybody to agree to what it is that they want. And so this went back and forth, with the public comments parts. You can imagine what everybody was saying. When it got to the council, now's where we start to see the interesting things. So there was a lot of conjecture back and forth. Everybody had their moment. Councilwoman Martinez Garcia, District 1, where this was planning to be located, she gave a very impassioned speech defending the neighborhood, saying that that many across her her district have been stepped on and not brought into this process as adequate stakeholders, and she thinks the same about this, and therefore she's against it. Councilwoman Wilson jumped in next. That's our District 6 councilwoman, and she was like,
5.
"No, sorry, yeah, 5." She's like, "I'm for this. We need this student housing. We need it to be close to Texas Tech. This brings revenue and infrastructure resources into there. I'm for it." Mayor Payne spoke for it, and he was like, "Oh, to me, this is apples and oranges to the Tech Terrace issue, even though I can't figure out what the big damn difference is personally." And Councilman Massengale started to say some things. One interesting one was that he was like, "I only count 2 people who spoke who actually live in the neighborhood," which really pissed off the audience and got everybody real upset. And then he stopped talking. And so Councilman McBrayer, who just had this issue in his district, was like, "Ooh, I'm really torn. Like I kind of see both sides of this one." Interesting how his perspective changed when it's not plopping down in the middle of his district. And then Councilwoman Joy came in with, as is often the case for her these days, the sense making in the room and the being like, "This doesn't conform to what we want." And actually, I haven't seen this play out that super hot in North Overton. So let's call a vote. Mr. McBrayer offered an amendment to try and kick it down the road and give the neighborhood and the developers a little bit more time to come to a consensus before they vote. Council voted that amendment down, and when they voted, it was 4 against and 3 for. The 3 votes for, of course, were Councilwoman Wilson, the mayor, and Mr. Massengale. Everybody else against. why this matters, or what it tells us is that now we start now predictably, this is something we both predicted, is that we will start to see an erosion in the council. The first vote was 7-0 against. Now it's 4-3 against. The next time a student housing project comes up, it's not going to matter what it looks like. It's getting through this council, and it's not going to matter where they want to plop it down, although it's more likely to be plopped down in some neighborhood that hasn't been able to defend themselves yet. And so we knew this was coming. We know what the solutions are, but we're seeing erosion in this area. Adam, go ahead.
I don't really have much to add other than that is really interesting. You already brought up the Mark McBrayer situation where when it was his district, it was more of an issue. I will have to mention, and Dr. Wilson and I have a good rapport, and so it's nothing. I'm not trying to say she's a horrible person or whatever. All I'm saying is the fact that I sat myself personally through a meeting where, fair enough, it wasn't her necessarily saying it, but she was bringing a issue from her constituency because they had an issue with a low income housing multifamily unit being too near $400,000 and $500,000 homes. They didn't want to look at it. So it is very interesting how people's opinions change depending on where it's at. Oh, it's over by Tech where I never go. Who cares? Screw those people. They're all poor anyway, right? That's all I got to say.
I think I'm so glad you remembered that point. Okay, now we want to get into today's meeting. We were advertising this. Folks who saw our Dora and Adam Pirtle, Dora Cortez, Adam Pirtle come on the show to talk about their Title VI complaint against the city. We'll remember our Dora's impassioned plea for folks to show up to this joint city council and planning and zoning commission meeting where they were discussing amendments to the UDC. Adam, do you want to pick it up from here?
Yeah, so this has been the ongoing saga with the Unified Development Code, which was actually passed by this council. These amendments come, this is really, we haven't seen this happen, I don't think, where something got passed and then it got immediately repicked back up and amendments happening. We have not really seen that. But that's what's happening with our Unified Development Code. This deals with zoning around the city, which is really quick. It just means what can be built next to what and what are the rules about that, right? One of the huge issues that we've seen, there's a couple of things we've seen that have played out throughout this process. One is the very heavy developer influence on the Unified Development Code, which you would sort of expect. Fair enough. They're the ones that deal with this stuff day in, day out. This is their business. Of course, they have probably an oversized interest in this situation compared to the citizenry. Fair enough. And they've made plenty of requests. I think the first document, the first document they handed city council was tens of pages, and that was during the first process. There was also several meetings that didn't happen in front of the public that happened about this, and several back and forths between developers and city council emailing back and forth, and all of these various things.
Access to city staff,
all of that,
all the live long day with them.
Yeah. So they've had their say for sure. All right. But there's another factor here. And the argument always given about the developer community is, oh, well, look at the tax base they're creating. They make a new subdivision and then you add all of these properties to the tax base. Who moves in and pays those taxes? Citizens of Lubbock, Texas. And they're probably not the developers. Okay. So that being the case, you've got a whole other factor here to listen to. The citizens that have to live next to this stuff. And so one of those issues that has come up time and again is the industrial sites next to the neighborhoods in District 1 and 2. I know people that have watched the show know what I'm talking about. So it was not a secret. This has been being promoted that the community was going to show up en masse to this council meeting and have their say, as they should. There's two types of different meetings when it comes to our city council that the public can participate in. One of those is just a regular city council meeting. Okay. And in those meetings, there's very specific rules about citizen comments. They've got to be about something on the agenda, and it can be no longer than 3 minutes. So that's one type of meeting. The other type of meeting that happens a lot less frequently is called a public hearing. This is when literally anybody can just show up and say their piece for or against whatever the topic is. And so the UDC today was a joint public hearing. So as such, we've never seen it any other way other than people can just get up, and on a public hearing, you have no time limit. So you can say whatever. Most people do normally go on, 10, 15, 20 minutes sometimes. And so these generally go on longer. It has not been a secret that a lot of the community was going to show up to talk about the industrial sites. We've been back and forth about what's called amortization, which no need to discuss it here. That's a much heavier lift for the city council to do. But we still proposed it. We still proposed it today. Josh gave that as one of our official amendment proposals as Lubbock Compact, and I gave the other. But before I get into all of that, the thing that got me so upset in this meeting is we all show up at 2 p.m. for the meeting. Everybody fills in the chambers, the meeting starts, and the mayor says, oh, by the way, on this public hearing, you can only talk about things that are in this list of things that we picked, 12 amendments that were given to them by a mixture of city staff and developers, and some input from the community. There was very little of it that was actual input from the community. And so that's what was going on. And then he says, if you want to make an amendment outside of that, you need to give that to the city staff in writing, and they'll consider that. The problem with that is twofold. The first one is that's a huge violation of how these meetings are supposed to go. The mayor technically has the role of setting the parameters of meetings, but there's even a way that he has to do that. In order to move the meeting times from, I think they were at 5 p.m. to now 2 p.m., which was his first act in office, by the way. In order to do that, he needed a vote. And so they did that. And, I'm not exactly sure if it applies to this sort of rule change, but either way, there's very specific rules about how these meetings are supposed to be ran. The rules for these, including the rule that they have to give people a 72-hour notice, and all of these different kind of things, how they have to structure the meeting, the fact that city council members can't meet with 3 or more members of the council outside of the council to discuss business. All of these sorts of rules come from the state. So if somebody really, and I spoke this in one of my comments, if somebody really had the energy and bandwidth to do it, he could probably get in trouble from some of the regulatory agencies for making that change like that, unbeknownst to anybody, and just laying it on everybody as they come in there. Now, mind you, the room was filled with residents from districts 1 and 2 that are passionate about this issue, and were ready and willing to go up there and talk. What he did was effectively silence them. And so that was also my public comment. I feel I was rightfully so upset. And I went up there to speak on behalf of the people that he effectively silenced. And so since they wanted something in writing, we made our proposals in writing right there in handwriting on our agendas, because they're just hitting us with this. And we got them in there. And so the other proposed amendment that we had was, which is a much lighter lift for the city council. They could do this and it wouldn't affect anything, but it would go a long way in showing the communities your intent. And so what that is the city could change all of the current industrial sites. The zoning is currently either M1 or M2. All right. They can change that zoning where those sites sit to transitional. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything for the business right now. They're going to continue to operate as they have, and they can operate for however long they choose to operate. Where it fixes things or begins to fix things is if that business should stop operating, there's very specific rules about when the use becomes non-conforming, meaning when it's no longer legal to have that use in that spot because you've updated your zoning or whatever. Under our current rules, if the business just flat out stops operating, you have to wait a whole entire year and then that can be done. Or if 75% of the building is destroyed in some natural disaster, lightning, starts a fire, tornado, whatever, then you could also have it to where that business can't come back. So what transitional does is it sets that up. You change that zoning to transitional there, so that way when something like that happens, or on empty lots, because there's plenty of empty lots, particularly in East Lubbock, that are industrial sites, previous industrial sites that have huge gin buildings and all these kind of unsightly things that are just there rotting in the sun. You could change those as well. That way, because right now, technically, some business could come into one of those empty lots and put some industrial use right there, flat in the in the middle of the neighborhood again. And so that's what transitional does. It just really sets it up to where you're safeguarding those lots from being that thing again once it can no longer be there. And so that's what we propose, is changing all of those to transitional. And I had to reiterate to the mayor, I did speak directly to him as the person who controls how the meetings go. I did speak directly to him. I did not put that on the entire council because I don't believe it was on the entire council. I believe he made that decision. The city manager and city attorneys can't do anything. They're, like I told everybody, city council has 3 employees: the city manager, city attorneys, city secretary. They can't tell him anything. If he walks in there that day and says, oh yeah, by the way, guys, we're going to change the entire rules of how public hearings work right now because I don't want to hear from these people from North and East Lubbock talk about amortization for 30 minutes or an hour or whatever. I'm going to change this rule. They can't really tell him anything. They can't do anything. They have to just go, okay, and just go along with it. So it was absolutely on him. I think that this is not becoming of servant leadership. This is becoming of authoritarian and reactionary leadership. And we don't need authoritarian or reactionary leadership. We need leadership that's going to unify the community. We need leadership that's going to listen to the community, because that's how you start to unify the community. What this council and so many councils prior to have misunderstood is that their brand is no good with the citizens. They think it is because they get elected by 2 city council districts, and the whole city elect all of these people. They get elected, and they just, they think that they're acting out the will of the people at large, and they absolutely are not. They absolutely are not. It's going to take different leadership. I hate to say that, we try to work with councils as they are. This has been one of the most dysfunctional councils that we've seen. And say what you will about the previous mayor and the council that was there. We have not had this many split votes when they were together, when it was the previous council. This council from the beginning has so many split votes, so many arguments on the dais. The mayor talking in a demeaning way to Joy and Miss Patterson Harris and whoever else he feels like at the time, and all of these things. I think it's madness. I think it's crazy, and it's unfortunate. But the outcome, in my opinion, at least for now, is about as ideal as we can get. And so they've taken these, what started out as 12 amendments on their agenda, ended up at 20 or something by the end of it, by everybody adding their amendments. And so I think they did the right thing in choosing to send that back to city staff and have city staff analyze it and then come back for a vote. It really should have been handled differently from the start. But never a wrong time to start doing the right thing, right? So
Yeah, no, there's just so much to say about this, and I thought you spoke beautifully at the meeting, Adam, as you always do. You got a great response. But yeah, I mean, stack up the shadiness of this council. It's like these last minute rule changes, these last minute time changes, the original time change that was in a shady agenda, I got intel that you're gonna come up here and speak about the wrong thing. The whole thing just speaks of like, it's improper, it's paranoid, it's so obviously like trying to use process to like, you know, wear people out. It's petty tyrant work. It really strikes me as pathetic, honestly. But you are right. The outcome was ultimately good in that it's particularly the amendments that we suggested do now go onto a recommendation, do go back before the Planning and Zoning Commission where they can reassert their original recommendation that the city do something about this, which again, if you want to talk shady council members, like suddenly vanished down a memory hole and everybody pretended like didn't happen. And so, yeah, this was a good outcome. There will be one more chance to get a bite at the apple here. And we hope that they take it. And we hope to see different things from the dais. Okay, we're over time, but we finished almost right on time.
Well, we didn't do too bad. We had a lot to cover. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks for all the comments, all the questions. Stacy, we are not mad at you for asking a lot of questions. We love it. We love when people have lots to say. We know that you stay up on the city issues, so you're more than welcome to voice your insight at any time. Please do. So thanks everybody. We will catch you right back here next time. Good night.